Tommy Jaggi, a fan cited here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher to talk about our week 3 reactions from around the NFL. Marcus, it was a wild ride to say the least, capped off by what proved to be an exciting game last night. Detroit Lions, Baltimore Ravens. I didn't see it going this way. I don't think we're going to talk about that a lot this morning. How are things going to go between the Baltimore Ravens now moving forward? What is on their plate? Are they in trouble here? We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys getting their butts beat again.
Do we have
Marcus,
to?
your team.
Do we have to?
We have to.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we'll see. Is their season over? We're going to talk about the AFC versus the NFC. Is the NFC really that much better than the AFC? And are the Giants making the right decision? Starting Jaxson Dart. All these things happening right now, Marcus. I want to kick it over to you. What are your thoughts overall from week 3?
Yeah, I thought we learned a lot in week 3. We had some really big matchups. We heard we saw teams like the Packers get into, a dogfight with the Browns and ultimately end up losing that game. But I do think we should start with this Lions-Ravens game, which was, I think for me, the best game over the weekend. It had two teams that we expect to be in the playoffs. And let's start with the Ravens before we get to the Lions. I am a little concerned about the Ravens. They've played two good teams so far in the Bills and the Lions. They lost both those games. The defense has been unable to get stops. They gave up 38 to Detroit. They gave up 40 to Buffalo. Both teams ran all over them. And I think the thing that's concerning about Baltimore is this is kind of just what they do. They beat up on a lot of bad teams in the AFC. They usually do pretty well in their division, but when they play these top tier teams, whether it's in the AFC or the NFC, they really struggle. And there's nothing that we've seen either from last year or this year that suggests that anything has changed.
Yeah, I think it's a major concern when you look at the team so far, how they've been losing these games. They give up 40 in week 1. They give up 30 in week 2. Now, granted, those are really good football teams. You lost to the Bills. You lost to the Lions. That kind of stuff happens. You're going to get battle tested even further here coming up, but it's the manner in which they're losing. Lamar Jackson was sacked 7 times in this game. You could say that a couple of those were on him, but the biggest issue, Mark, is they could not stop the running game. 244 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground for the Detroit Lions. Do you see that being a colossal problem for the Ravens moving forward? And will that prevent them from being a legitimate contender?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Lamar Jackson has 10 touchdowns this year, no interceptions, and they're 1-2. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a pretty bad sign. Like, this offense is putting up points and you're still not able to win these games. And you're right. It's the run defense. Buffalo shredded them with James Cook. And then, obviously in this game, David Montgomery had the big run. Detroit had 2 95-plus yard touchdown drives in this game. We're so used to Baltimore being this big, bad bully that's going to be physical and they're going to out-tough you. And I don't think Buffalo or Detroit was scared of them at all. And I think that's what's so concerning about this Ravens team is there's just a lack of toughness that they've had in previous years that they don't have. Can they get it back at some point in the season? We'll see. But I just don't think they have the horses up front that they've had in previous years to get it done.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Ravens now through 3 weeks on the scope of things, it's like, all right, you lost 41-40 against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And it's like, okay, not going to overreact to that. Ravens very well could have won that game. We talked about that after week 1. Maybe the play calling there, if John Harbaugh would have been a little bit more aggressive on that final drive to go out and win the game instead of punting the ball back to Josh Allen. And then they go last week, Marcus, and they thwomp the Browns 41-17. We're like, okay, the Ravens are back. And now we see these week 1 concerns resurface after week 3. This defense is bad. And even though it's got names, you've got a good secondary, if there's nothing more deflating than getting a run on for 200+ yards at 6 yards a clip, like if you're going to be that type of defense, it kind of doesn't matter how good Lamar plays.
Yes, I agree. And I think one of the things that's going to be challenging this year is what do we overreact to? Because they play the Chiefs and the Texans the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Two of the least exciting offenses in the NFL right now. They do play the Rams and Bears and the Dolphins and the Vikings coming up, but man, they've got a lot of games in the back half of their schedule, whether it's 2 games against the Steelers, a game against the Browns, a game against the Jets, a game against the Bengals, actually 2 games against the Bengals, where you're going to be playing a lot of bad quarterbacks. So I can already see the narrative timing forming like, hey, this Ravens defense in the second half of the year, they're really starting to turn things around. And that's because you've played Jake Browning twice and you've played Joe Flacco or Dylan Gabriel and Justin Fields. Like, I'm concerned about this team, not so much for the regular season, because I do think they're going to be in the playoffs, but is this a team that's a viable Super Bowl champion? I don't think so.
I mean, certainly not at their current state, I wouldn't think. And Marcus, you know who it reminds me of is another AFC North team from last year, the Cincinnati Bengals, who had a MVP caliber quarterback. The offense was firing on all cylinders, even the running game with Chase Brown, but they didn't have a defense, and that was the ultimate fallback. The ultimate problem that they had that prevented them to even making the playoffs. Is that going to prevent the Ravens from making the playoffs? I doubt it. They're still going to be in that race somewhere, but they won't be as threatening, obviously, if they can't fix that running game. Marcus,
we'll get to we'll get to the Ravens and the AFC playoff picture in a minute, but you're right. Let's talk about the Lions because they deserve a lot of the credit here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the team that just beat them on Monday Night Football on the road. And the Lions were interesting because when they opened in week 1, I'm like, yikes. I mean, we talked about what impact is it going to have losing Ben Johnson, losing Aaron Glenn, losing Frank Ragnow. Like, your team looks different. Are they going to be as talented? Are they going to be as well coached? Well, I think that they're proving that they are. And so week 1, I was a little bit concerned when you saw how bad they looked on the road against the Green Bay Packers. It was only a 2-score game in the end, but it did not feel that way. The game felt like it was over at halftime. And then what happens? They go out and they destroy the Bears. They put up 52 on the Bears last week, and then 38 against the Ravens here, Marcus. Is this the Detroit Lions that we've seen each of the last 3 years now? Is this the same team?
I mean, this is an unbelievable team. Now, they're not without their flaws. If you can pressure Jared Goff with your front four, or if you can have some creative blitzes, I do think that's where things get a little bit wonky for this Lions offense. But they have so many weapons. The offensive line is still really good. They can run the ball at will against any defense in the league. But I think the more impressive part here was their defense. They sacked Lamar Jackson 7 times. And I know Lamar had some big statistical numbers, but they did a really good job late in this game of taking away throwing windows and limiting the rushing ability. Derrick Henry only had 50 rushing yards in this game. Like, they are playing really fundamentally sound defense. And yeah, they only have a couple big name players on defense, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. But this is one of the better team defenses. And I fully expect the Lions to be one of the 3 or 4 teams once we get to the playoffs that has a realistic chance of making the Super Bowl. Like, this is a very, very well put together team.
Yeah, and I think a team that we might have even been a little bit too low on in our preseason power rankings just because of the coaching turnover that they had. But Aiden Hutchinson back, he's looking as good as ever. I mean, that's a huge factor in that defense, as well as their defense going to be elite. I don't know. I mean, they just allowed 30 to the Ravens, but the Ravens have a great offense. I think you played them about as well as you could in that game. So Lions looking like true contenders again, Marcus. Let's look more broad picture now. AFC against the NFC. And if I just read through some of these names, I'm going to start with the AFC here. These are the teams that have 1 or fewer wins through 3 games. The Patriots, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Texans, the Titans, the Raiders, the Broncos, and the Kansas City Chiefs, Marcus. And 4 of those teams are winless through 3 games. You look at the NFC, it's a different story. Only a couple of teams, the 2 teams don't have a win so far. That's the New York Giants, the New Orleans Saints. Not surprising. 2 teams we predicted just a little bit ago would be in contention for that number 1 overall pick potentially. They have multiple divisions where they've got at least 3 teams with 2 wins. One division, the NFC West, is 2-1 or better every team. Is it too early to call, Marcus, or is the NFC really just that much better than the AFC right now?
I think the NFC is significantly better. Right now, you have 6 teams in the AFC that have more than 1 win, right? And one of those teams is like the Bengals, who have absolutely no chance of making the playoffs now that Joe Burrow is gone. Another one of those teams is your Steelers, who have been outgained by like 400 yards in their 2 losses this year. Now the Colts have been really good. Jacksonville's been a tough watch, but they are 2-1. I think the concern here in the AFC is we think the Bills are going to be an awesome team. They're 3-0. They're probably going to be the 1 seed. The Chargers feel like a good contender. I think everybody expects the Chiefs and Ravens to eventually figure things out. But after those teams, it just feels like there's a significant drop off in talent. Whereas in the NFC, you could have some really good teams end up missing the playoffs, whether that's like Seattle, who's 2-1 and they're running the ball like crazy, and that defense is so well coached. Or, maybe you get a team like the Rams, who are 2-1, who lost a game to the Eagles that they probably shouldn't have lost. I think the overall talent is much better in the NFC. I think they're deeper. We'll see what it looks like when we get to January and February. But as we stand right now, I think if you're stacking like the bottom 8 teams in the league, I think 6 of them are in the AFC.
Yeah, Marcus, and these tiers drop off really fast when you look at the AFC. You got the Bills at the top of the conference at 3-0. The Colts are sitting there with them. Do we buy them as contenders? We'll talk about them in just a second. But the teams that we thought would give the Bills the biggest run of their money, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, are both 1-win football teams entering week 4 of the 2025 season. That is something that we did not see coming. And so what other teams are going to step up to fill that void? Who else can be a serious contender in this conference? I think that the question is warranted. And when you look at the NFC, there's just a lot more depth. I mean, there's a lot more depth. Even if you argue that the Bills are as good as any team in the league, you can look at teams 2 through 8, 2 through 9, 2 through 11, and say that is where we are right now. The NFC is just more talented that way.
Now, I will say the AFC has the better quarterbacks, and that's what you're hoping, like with Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. If those guys can continue to play well, especially in Lamar Jackson's case, and the defense gets up to speed by the time we get to October and November, they're probably going to be fine. And this is where, like for the Ravens, they're 1-2 now, and they play Kansas City this week. So one of those teams is going to be 1-3. But Baltimore's schedule is fairly easy on the back end. Like, so could we see them win 5 or 6 games in a row and still get to, 11-6? Like, I don't think that's a stretch at all. It's just, I think the thing you're concerned about if you're a Ravens fan right now is it's just more of the same from last year. Yeah, we can beat up on these bad teams, but can we beat the good teams? That's, I think, what Baltimore and Kansas City and a team like Denver is trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, and we don't want to hit the panic button 3 weeks into the season, but when you start 1-3, which one of these supposedly good AFC teams is about to do, you've got such an uphill battle from there. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, what are the chances of making the playoffs when you start with a 1-3 record? It's not good. You have to be pretty spotless down the stretch.
No, I will say, because of the AFC, because we only have what do we say, 6 teams with a winning record right now.
You can go on a win streak.
You can go on a win streak. Like I feel pretty confident that we're going to have a 9-8 playoff team coming out of the AFC. Like right now, the NFC is 10-3 against the AFC. You've got a lot of really tough games coming up. I just think you're going to get a 9-8 playoff team. So let's say it's the Chiefs. Let's say it's the Chiefs that end up being the 6 or 7 seed in the AFC. And it's, their reward in round 1 as the 7 seed is playing the 2 seed, which is Baltimore, right? Or whoever that might be, the Colts. Maybe the Colts have a really good season. I don't think for a team like Baltimore or Kansas City, being a 6 or 7 seed is a death nail. But you also don't really want to live on the edge like that either.
Yeah, I mean, it was not good for the Bengals when they tried that out last year. And even when they got hot down the stretch, they fell short, couldn't make the tournament. And so 1-3 is not that death sentence, but you get to 1-4. That's when we're really talking. It's like, okay, your chances now of making it are really low, regardless of your schedule. Just history tells us you've got to be really flawless down the stretch. So we'll see how that turns out. But I would agree with you, Marcus. The NFC is better than the AFC now, pretty handedly. Maybe I think at best you can argue the teams at the top of the conference are comparable. But even then, I mean, the depth of the Eagles roster, the depth of the Packers roster. AFC has the quarterbacks. There's no question.
Yep.
They're still the quarterback conference. Can they overcome their roster talent deficiencies and prove that it's still a quarterback league? I think that's the biggest question.
We'll see. I mean, those quarterbacks generally do a good job of stabilizing franchises as you get past, September. September football is always really sloppy, and there's always a couple teams that fool us, right? I would be shocked if the Chiefs and the Ravens don't make the playoffs, but these teams do have some big flaws that I don't know are going to get fixed by the time we get to the end of the year.
All right, Marcus, let's talk about one of the teams that we just brushed across here, and that is the Houston Texans. They are off to an 0-3 start. 2 years ago, I was so optimistic about the future of this team. I liked everything they had going from the coaching staff. You had the rookie of the year quarterback. You had Will Anderson, the rookie of the year on defense. They had, it seemed like all the necessary pieces in place: quarterback, coaching, pass rushers. Offensive line was playing at a decent level back then. Fast forward 2 years, this does not look like the same football team. They can't score points. Their offensive line can't block. They're having so many troubles early in the season. What happened to this team? What happened to this young, talented roster that we just saw? Were they fraudulent to begin with?
Well, let's first start with their defense, because I think their defense is unbelievable. They played a couple really good offenses, including the Rams and the Buccaneers, and they've not given up more than 20 points in a game yet. 14 to the Rams, 20 to the Buccaneers, 17 to Jacksonville, and that's with a lot of turnovers on offense. So I think this defense is absolutely legit, and honestly, it might be the best defense in the league right now. So if they can ever figure out some of the issues in offense, I do think they are a team that can go on a winning streak. The problem is CJ Stroud has really regressed, and I understand the offensive line concerns. Like they've moved a lot of different guys up there. They're struggling to protect him. They've invested a lot of picks and money into that position, and the results aren't there. But one of the things that's pretty clear is that CJ Stroud's just not the same quarterback without Tank Dell in the lineup. And we've got a very, very big sample size to kind of prove that. Whenever Tank Dell is healthy, this is an awesome offense. Without him, you're looking at CJ Stroud having like the lowest passer rating in the league. Tank Dell's not going to be back in the lineup at all this year with that massive knee injury. They still have Nico Collins. Tommy, it reminds me a lot of like Deshaun Watson in Houston, where Watson had DeAndre Hopkins, who was the number one receiver. But when he had Will Fuller, that's when that offense was dynamic, and that's when they were really hard to stop. You take away Will Fuller, Deshaun Watson looks like a very, very mediocre quarterback. I can't believe it's happening again.
It just seems wild to me. And if that really is the case, Marcus, and I think that Tank Dell has a lot to do with it, the weight of your entire season hangs on one of the smallest guys in the NFL, 165-pound receiver. Like, there's no doubt that he's important. You would have thought, though, that their proactive approach, going out and drafting Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, getting other talented receivers on your roster, that would help supplement for that, the loss of Tank Dell. That hasn't been the case so far. Like, do you see this turning around at some point in the near future? And so, I mean, that streak could snap right now. They play the Titans this week, but then you play Baltimore, you play Seattle, who's been better than anybody expected. You play the 49ers, who are still undefeated. They've got some tough games coming up. I mean, you could be looking at a scenario where they only have one win in the first six weeks of the season.
Yeah, and now I think one of the things that's so surprising is that the Colts are actually playing well. And I thought maybe, you could have a slow start to the year and, grind your way to 9-8, the way they've kind of done the last couple of years, where it's come down to that last game. But with the Colts putting this much distance between them already, it is pretty shocking. Real quick, Tommy, I've got the stats on CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, when he has Tank Dell in the lineup, that's 25 games. He's got a passer rating of 101. Without Tank Dell, we're on to 11 games now, passer rating of 68. And I think the reason is because they just don't have any speed in their offense, and they don't have anybody that can create that quick separation down the field. So everything feels very compressed and jammed at the line of scrimmage. And when you've got a bad pass rush, you're holding onto the ball, with bad offensive line, you're holding onto the ball, hoping somebody gets open. It's not happening. It's not so much that Tank Dell's like a Antonio Brown, all-pro caliber receiver. It's just they don't have anybody else in the offense that can give you that speed, and that's why Stroud is struggling.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against the results when you see them on paper like that. They are lacking for sure on offense. Like you said, defense is really good. If they can figure out a way to make it work with the young receivers they have, they can turn things around. But they can't wait too long because, like you said, the Colts are playing better than anybody expected. We're going to talk about them in just a little bit here, too. Marcus, let's talk about your team, the Dallas Cowboys. This was a second straight, and I would say, I'll preface with this. In week one, after all the rain delays, and there was a bunch going on there, but before the rain delays, Dallas was keeping stride for stride with the Eagles. Rain delays happen, and then it was kind of just a defensive slugfest. At that point, I was fairly optimistic. I'm like, maybe this defense will be okay without Micah Parsons. Not great, but okay, good enough. Then we see the last 2 weeks. Russell Wilson throws for 450 yards and 3 scores. Caleb Williams throws for 4 touchdowns. What do you have? 300 and some yards in this game. Like both of these quarterbacks that we kind of expected to be maybe in the bottom half of the league, at least early on in this season, have averaged over 10 yards an attempt on Dallas. This defense looks like a college unit out there right now. Like, what do you do if you're the Cowboys? Because I do think that their offense is good when CeeDee's healthy, and now they've got Tyler Booker injured as well. Dak Prescott is still a really good quarterback. What do you think is going to happen with them? Do they still have a chance?
First of all, thanks for the Baltimore Ravens for being so bad on defense. It takes some of the pressure off the Cowboys because now the Cowboys don't have the worst defense in the league. It's in Baltimore. So that helps. Number two, I mean, the Russell Wilson game was just, it was a disaster. I think Caleb Williams is a really good quarterback. We saw it, he's going into week 3, he had the most explosive plays. I think you're starting to see it play out a little bit. So that one's not as ridiculous as the Russell Wilson one, but to answer the bigger question, yeah, it's over for Dallas, just like it was over for Dallas once they traded Micah Parsons. And I know there were a lot of people talking about how the Cowboys are still a playoff team and how they're going to be able to get to 9 or 10 wins. And I would just say that you probably weren't watching because you saw how much Micah Parsons covered up for this defense over the last couple of years. And then when you remove him, you just remove that force multiplier. And now you're relying on guys like Dante Fowler and Marshawn Nealon and Sam Williams, who needed a superstar like Micah Parsons to take some of the pressure off them. The coverage is awful. They've got 5 cornerbacks out with injuries right now. And now the only thing that was good on your team, your offense, was CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Booker. Those guys are going to miss, in CeeDee's case, 2 to 4 weeks. In Tyler Booker's case, at least 6 games. You've already lost your starting center, Cooper Beebe, to a high ankle sprain for at least 6 games. The Cowboys were going to probably win 6 or 7 games with a fully healthy CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Booker. Without those guys, I think you're looking at 4 or 5.
Yeah, Marcus, and my concern with Dallas before the season started is you can look at the roster on paper and say, this is a pretty stud and dud unit. You got Dak, you got CeeDee, you got Parsons, so much relied on them. And then obviously Parsons gets traded. There goes one of your biggest studs, if not your biggest stud on your team. They just have so many roster holes that they can't make up for without, if the stars are not going to be there, they can't make up for them. Linebacker, safety, interior defensive line is better now. Thank you, Jerry. You got your second defensive tackle, but now they're suffering injuries on offense. And CeeDee has been one of the healthiest receivers in the league over the course of his career in terms of time not being missed. That's about to change. Offensive line injury. They're in a pickle. They are in a tough spot right now. Now,
this is why they made
them?
the trade. This is the reason why they made the trade, is because they looked at the NFC and they were rational about it and said, we are not as good as Philadelphia. We are not as good as Green Bay. We're not as good as the Rams. We're even with a fully healthy team, we're not going to get there. And rather than doing what some of these other teams do and just kind of continuing to kick the can down the road and try to get to 9-8 or 10-7, I think they realize, hey, it's time to have a real reset. And this is what it looks like. Like, for teams, for people that want to talk about tanking or organic tanking, this is what you have to deal with these really rough seasons where you have non-NFL players out there playing games. Could they grind their way to 5 wins? I think it's possible, but this is what it looks like. And they're going to have a bunch of cap space. They're going to have a bunch of draft picks. You're just going to have to wait a while for them to use them.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a player who has so much weight to carry right now. There's nobody in the NFL that's carrying more than Dak Prescott, because to win these games, you're going to have to win a shootout. I think he'll be able to do that in a lot of these. You look at the games coming up, though. They play the Green Bay Packers this week. That is a really tough go when you get that Micah Parsons revenge game, which I'm sure we'll be talking about on next week's show. But after that, Marcus, you have the Jets, you have the Panthers, you have the Commanders who aren't playing particularly well. You've got the Cardinals mixed in there. Like, you've got some games that maybe Cowboys can fire back a little bit and get themselves back into that discussion.
I mean, I think they're going to be probably 7-point underdogs to both Washington and Arizona. Arizona's 2-1 right now. And those are their easier games coming up. You look at the rest of their schedule, and it's absolutely brutal with games against Detroit, Kansas City, the Chargers, Philadelphia coming up. So if they're going to win some games, it's going to have to be against teams like Carolina and the Jets. But without CeeDee Lamb and without Tyler Booker and probably without Deron Bland, they're probably going to be underdogs in those games. And again, yes, they'll probably win a couple of them, but anybody expecting this thing to turn around quickly, it's just not going to happen this year. They know that. And again, that's why they made the Micah Parsons trade. It's about what they can do in 2026 and 2027, not in 2025.
Yeah, and if that really is their proactive approach, kudos to them, because they've taken a lot of flack for trading Parsons, but their final 6 games of the season, home against the Eagles, home against the Chiefs, at Detroit, home against the Vikings, home against the Chargers, Commanders. Oh, I missed the Giants. So there's 7 games there. So really, really tough slate in the second half of the schedule. They've got to turn things on now. But like you said, is it over for Dallas? Yeah, probably. If we're being realistic right now, watching this defense, which is the most porous defense in the league right now, it probably is.
And you want it to be over. Honestly, if you're a Cowboy fan, there's no point in winning a couple of these games and getting to 3-3 and trying to prolong the season. Like, having a top 2 or 3 pick in this year's draft, when there's a lot of quarterbacks that teams are going to want, that's how you quickly restart the rebuild, just like Detroit did when they got Aiden Hutchinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and Brian Branch and Jack Campbell. That's how you can turn this thing around quick.
But Marcus, like, I think it is curious, though, when you look at question for you in hindsight, would Cowboys have given Dak Prescott that deal? Like, if they truly are saying we're going to be rebuild mindset, would you go out and pay a 30-year-old quarterback $62 million a year?
I think it depends. It's going to be awfully hard to find a quarterback better than him. And I think they're trying to do this so they have a window over the next 3 years with Dak, 2026, 27, 28. So by the time that, either, he's at the end of his contract, you put yourself in a really good position. I could say either way, but man, it's really hard to find good quarterbacks in the league. And I wouldn't want to let him go for nothing.
All right, Marcus, let's move off of your Dallas Cowboys and talk about which team is better right now. Which team is not better, but the most surprising start to the season? The Indianapolis Colts or the LA Chargers. Both of these teams are 3-0. The Chargers had some impressive play, got some excellent performances out of Justin Herbert. They beat the Chiefs in week 1. The Colts, however, though they've had an easier schedule so far, it's the Colts. It's Daniel Jones. Like, he's quarterback that everybody gave up on before, didn't give a shot. And now it's kind of looking, it's mirroring what the Minnesota Vikings were doing last year and what proved to be a 14-3 season. And Sam Darnold had like this complete resurgence. You asked me about a month ago, am I buying Daniel Jones? And I was not a believer. He's edging me closer that way, but it's so hard to forget the 5 years of film that I've seen on Daniel Jones and then watch him on the Colts and see just how efficient he's been. I mean, this has been the best offense in the NFL through 3 weeks. Like, which team has had a more surprising start to you?
I'm actually going to say the Chargers. And the reason I'm going to say the Chargers is because they've played 3 divisional games to start the year, and they've won all 3. And, the Chiefs are a team that have historically given them a lot of problems, at least in the Justin Herbert era. You go and win that game. Denver has been a team that they've struggled with a little bit, and the Raiders have beaten them time and time again, no matter who's been at quarterback. So I think the fact that they're 3-0, given their start, and when you consider, they lost Rashawn Slater to start the year. They lost Khalil Mack in week 2. They've had a bunch of injuries, and they've been able to survive it. I'm shocked that they're 3-0 to start the year. And I actually think things are about to get a lot easier for them. Whereas the Colts, I think the Colts are playing unbelievable. So I don't want to shortchange them at all. But 2 of their 3 games have been at home. One of them against Miami. One of them was against Denver in a game they probably shouldn't have won if it wasn't for the awful penalty at the end of the game. They beat the Titans on the road. So Dolphins, Titans, probably 2 of the worst 5 teams in the league. I still think this Colts team is pretty good, but I think the Chargers, what they've done with their schedule is much more impressive.
Yeah, I think when you put it that way, knowing that they're already undefeated in their division, 3-0 through those first 3 games, that is an impressive mark. However, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to push back on you here. When we did our power rankings right before the start of the season, I thought that the Chargers I said they were their 5th best team. We went back and forth and ranked them. I put them 5, which seemed pretty high at the time. We got a little pushback for that. I think they're being the best version of the team that I thought they'd be. Justin Herbert looks like a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Jim Harbaugh is that coach. He is that guy. He gets the defense to play better, get them play tough. They're grinding out these wins against good teams. But Marcus, I did not expect this from the Colts. Shane Steichen was in the hot seat. Chris Ballard was in the hot seat. They, in a desperation move to try to refurbish a quarterback that everybody was giving up on already in Daniel Jones. He's looking like the B version of Josh Allen right now, early on in the season. And schedule regardless, I still think that what he's doing is more impressive than I could have anticipated. They look good on both sides of the ball. They're running the ball. They're throwing the ball very efficiently. I think they punted one time. Was it one time they punted?
I think
in
1
3
time,
games?
yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't expect that. That caught me really off guard for sure.
Yeah, the schedule does get a lot harder for them. I mean, you can't play cupcakes every single week, but I think the way that they're playing is very good. And we've seen these Shane Steichen teams do this before, where they start out the year fairly good and they start to fade down the stretch a little bit, but they're getting good quarterback play. I was going to say adequate quarterback play, but they're getting better than that. Jonathan Taylor's healthy. And I think, honestly, that's the big part, is this running game looks really good. So Daniel Jones doesn't have to do a ton. He can just drop back, throw the ball to the weapons, not feel like he's got to carry the offense. And I think this is a good reminder for some of these quarterbacks. You could be in a really bad situation, and if you get put into a situation where you don't have to be the guy that carries the franchise, you're not asked to be the franchise saving quarterback, you can see some positive results. There's been a lot of players now who have left the Giants and gone elsewhere and have played much, much better. It's fun to see Daniel Jones thriving.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And in those 3 games, 2 of them were just absolute blowouts, and they put up 33 points, 29 points, and 41 points. I'd love it for one time, a Steelers offense to be able to do that post Ben Roethlisberger. I've been waiting a long time. So we'll see if that can continue. They get a real test this week. You playing at the LA Rams. And so this could show their true colors right away, Marcus. Like if they get thwomped in this game here, maybe the Colts are just fraudulent, but if they can keep that game close, I think we might have a potential contending team, maybe at least in the AFC.
Imagine if they win that game. Let's say they beat the Rams and they're 4-0, and they're starting to create even more distance on teams like the Texans in their division. I think we're going to be having a much different conversation about the Colts, but that is a very fun game here to watch in week 4.
You talk about delivering Steichen and Ballard when the pressure is on. They're certainly doing that so far. Can they keep it up? That's the question. We will continue to monitor them throughout the year. All right, Marcus, let's talk about the Giants making a bold decision at quarterback, benching 36-year-old Russell Wilson and going with Jaxson Dart. Now, in week 2, Wilson had a phenomenal game against Dallas. And after watching that, Marcus, I'm like, okay, he just bought himself a little bit of time here. You don't put up 450 yards, 3 scores in a shootout game. They probably should have won. He did have an errant pass. Was it in overtime?
Yeah.
The interception there. But you don't have a game like that and then suddenly get benched. Well, it just goes to show that's not the case. 1 week later, he gets canned now to the bench. We know how much Dable likes Jaxson Dart, but we also know that they have a very difficult game on their hands right now. They are playing the 3-0 Chargers, who we were just talking up a second ago. Is making the move now the right choice? You wait 1 more week, you can play the Saints.
Probably not. But I think Brian Dable was worried about losing the locker room. And honestly, you saw this play out on Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs. Malik Neighbors' body language was so bad in that game. And I think you started to see it from the entire team. Like there was just Russell Wilson's play was so bad that it zapped all of the juice out of this organization. And rather than they're probably going to lose this week regardless, just to be clear. But rather than going 0-4 with Russell Wilson, you'd rather go 0-4 with Jaxson Dart and at least have somebody that gives you a little bit of hope and some hype for this game. I I'm shocked that they did it, but I think Brian Dable felt like, hey, I honestly I might lose this team, and that we could. Their schedule's really hard. They could go 0-6, 0-7 to start the season, and that probably means that Joe Shane and Brian Dable are gone. And a lot of times you're making decisions in the NFL for job security, and I think this is one of those times.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it is. That's another coach we talked about being in the hot seat, and we knew that decision was coming at some point this year. You don't trade back up into the first round, and especially, I mean, I know Russell Wilson pretty well. He was really bad down the stretch. With the Steelers, his last 5 games, counting the playoff game against Baltimore, he led the team to 14 points per game. In the playoff game, didn't even score until the third quarter. I think he lost the team then. He's losing it now. 2 of his first 3 games, Marcus, he scored 9 or fewer points in. You just can't have that. And then you talk about the body language. I noticed that, and it's funny that you said that because I noticed that with Neighbors. It was very evident on film. He's doing his George Pickens impersonation there, if you will. But you could see the distaste for some of the ball placement on those deep balls. There was one in the corner of the end zone. Wasn't even close. Never stood a shot at it. And he was basically trying to fight back to the ball, playing defensive back. Like, maybe he has already lost the locker room. There's been a lot of talk of Russell Wilson in the past, his personality. Does it rub people the wrong way? Whatever. I don't know what the case is because I don't know him personally that way, but it looks like this is over for him. Barring an injury, I don't think he gets another chance ever in the league. But Jaxson Dart, Marcus, the one positive I will say about this, even making this switch against a 3-0 team this week in the Chargers, maybe he lights it up. Maybe he just has a really good game, and that is like the huge jolt of confidence this franchise needs.
Yeah, they just needed something. They needed some kind of change because this was getting really bad. I think after the way they lost last week and then how poorly the offense performed in week 3, at least with Jaxson Dart, the fans can talk themselves into, okay, hey, we've got this quarterback that we're trying to see if he can be the guy. Kim Scatteraboo looks really good at running back. We know we've got Malik Neighbors, who's an all-pro caliber receiver. At least it's something different. And I think that Dart is going to struggle at times. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to have turnovers, but the difference in athleticism, the difference in being able to make throws over the court, over the middle of the field is going to give this offense some life. And honestly, if you're a Giants fan, that's all you want. You just want reasons to be optimistic and hopeful going forward. And I think that's why Dable ultimately made the move.
All right, Marcus, let's move on now. And I want to talk about Carson Wentz, a name that I didn't think we'd be talking about this season at all. But the Vikings are rolling with Wentz for now. Now, you could say McCarthy's injured. Do you think he's injured? Is he not injured? Like,
he's injured. He's banged up. Otherwise, you would have.
But injured where to the point where you can play through probably if need be. Let's just look at how things have transpired so far for the Vikings. They had a Sam Darnold last year, 35 touchdowns, 4,300 yards, led them to a 14-3 record. Obviously, they were bounced in the first round of the playoffs, so postseason didn't go as planned, but they had tremendous success with a reclamation project at quarterback. And now they try McCarthy, the young guy who sat with a clipboard last year, had the meniscus injury, ready to play in week 1. Those first 3 quarters of the game, that was kind of rough to watch. Had a good fourth quarter against the Bears, ended up winning by a field goal. Last week against the Falcons, they lost 22-6, and he was barely able to sustain drives. They make the change to Carson Wentz after the injury. And in Wentz's first game, albeit against the Cincinnati Bengals, they put up 48 points. Now, there's a couple of defensive touchdowns in there. There's a caveat right there. But Wentz looked like he can manage that Kevin O'Connell offense. I mean, he's been around the league so many times. I think he actually broke a record to start X amount of a game with 6 different teams in 6 years or whatever, right? He's been around the league. Who do you think, and we're just playing hypothetically here, we're making our best guess. Who do you think Kevin O'Connell wants at quarterback moving forward for this season at least?
I think it's McCarthy, right? But I think he understands that he might not be ready. And, I think he has a serious high ankle injury, and that's why he's not playing. And I think he'll ultimately find out with Carson Wentz that he's not a long-term option. Can he be a good backup quarterback? Yeah, I think so. But like, I think this week against Pittsburgh with multiple offensive linemen out, I won't be surprised if you see him turn him back into a pumpkin like he's been the last 4 or 5 years, right? I think Wentz can be a viable backup. I think they want McCarthy to be the starter. But the issue with McCarthy is he's thrown 750 passes since 2019. You have to go all the way back to high school. It's 750 passes. That's just not a lot of football. He can't stay on the field. He's never really been asked to run an offense or be the focal point of the offense. And now you're putting him into a big time position in probably the best division in the NFL, the NFC North. They've got a bunch of big games coming up. And I think they're just trying to buy him some more time to get him ready. We'll see. I think we're going to see McCarthy once they get back from the bye. They're playing in Ireland this week. They've got another overseas game in week 5. But this is not a great situation right now in Minnesota.
Yeah, Marcus, we are seeing a trend now in the NFL with quarterbacks who have very little college experience come in and they struggle. I mean, it seems to be going that way where it's like, all right, the guys that you feel more confident about are the guys that have started 3-4 years in college. McCarthy was not that guy. Like you said, not that many pass attempts so far throughout his collegiate and NFL career combined. Carson Wentz is not that guy. We can both agree that you need to go with McCarthy. You can argue, I think the only thing you can argue is that Wentz would be the better player for the immediate just to try to salvage this offense. But high ankle sprain, I'm sure that's bothering him. That's part of the equation here. But Marcus, when is the right time to bring him back? Because I'm looking right now, if it's not the Steelers, you've got the Browns defense, the Eagles, Chargers, Lions. After that, maybe the Ravens game, we talked about how bad their defense was. Maybe he's fully healthy by then, or you try to just bring him back as soon as he's ready.
You make the decision when you need to make the decision. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a couple games in here where Carson Wentz just doesn't play well because this is a guy that, like you said, has bounced around the league the last couple of years for a reason. He's not a very good quarterback. If he plays well for a game or two, you let it ride out and you let McCarthy get a little healthier. But I just have a hard time seeing this be like the Sam Darnold situation because Darnold was way younger with a better arm and he was way healthier than what Wentz has ever been. I think we'll see McCarthy back in the lineup sooner rather than later.
That would be my prediction as well. All right, we go live on this show, the Stacking the Box No Huddle Show, every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow Marcus at Marcus_Mosher. You can follow me at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Stacking the Box podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube. You can follow my written work on stillcurtain.com, Marcus's written work on the Fansided NFL Network. And be sure to check out fansided.com for all of your daily sports needs. And thanks again for watching Stacking the Box.